There are stories that don't begin with screams or shadows, but with something far more unsettling: a normal family, living an ordinary life, who slowly realize that whatever is happening around them is not following the rules they understand. The Bell Witch story begins just like that, quietly. On a stretch of farmland in early 19th century Tennessee, long before it became folklore, before tourists arrived, and before anyone thought to call it a haunting at all, before it was a legend, it was simply a family trying to work the land, raise their children, and get through the night without being disturbed by something they could not see. In 1804, John Bell moved his family west from North Carolina and settled on a large farm along the Red River in what is now Robertson County, Tennessee. The land was fertile, the location was promising, and the Bells were exactly the kind of family that frontier communities relied on. John Bell was a farmer, a landowner, and a respected deacon in the local Baptist church. His wife Lucy ran the household, and their children worked the fields, attended church, and grew up surrounded by neighbors who knew them well. For more than 10 years, nothing about the Bell farm stood out. There were no rumors, no conflicts, no strange reputations attached to the family or the land. By every account, their life was demanding but stable, shaped by routine, labor, and faith. That stability is important because when things began to change, there was no obvious reason for them to do so. Around 1817, the Bells started noticing sounds in the house at night that didn't behave like normal farm noises. Scratching could be heard along the walls, sometimes moving from one side of the cabin to the other. Knocking came from doors and windows, not violently, but persistently, and without any clear pattern. When John or his sons went outside to investigate, the sounds stopped immediately, only to resume once everyone was back in bed. At first, the family dismissed it. Old wooden houses shifted, animals brushed against walls. The wind carried sound in strange ways across the open land. But the noises continued, night after night, and gradually became more intrusive. Soon, the children began reporting things that were harder to explain away. They claimed to see animals on the property that behaved unnaturally, including a large black dog that appeared in the fields and vanished when approached, and birds that seemed to change shape or disappear altogether. These sightings didn't happen once or twice, but repeatedly, and often involved more than one witness at a time. Inside the house, the disturbances became physical. Beds shook without warning. Blankets were pulled from sleeping children. The sensation of being touched by unseen hands became so common that the children began sleeping together for comfort. These were not vague fears. The children showed visible marks, pinches, and scratches the next morning. Still, none of this prepared the family for what happened next. One evening, during another round of unexplained knocking, a sound emerged that didn't resemble an animal, the wind, or the house settling. It was a voice, faint at first, almost indistinct, but unmistakably human. Over time, the voice became clearer, stronger, and more confident, responding directly to questions asked aloud. It demonstrated an unsettling level of awareness. It recited Bible verses accurately, sang hymns known to the family, and repeated sermons that had been preached earlier that same day in churches miles away. Sermons no one in the Bell household had attended. It corrected people when they misquoted scripture and mocked them when they challenged it. This was not a random presence. It listened, it remembered, and it responded. When pressed about what it was, the voice gave inconsistent answers. Sometimes it claimed to be a spirit, other times it suggested it had once been human. On occasion, it refused to answer at all. Eventually, it adopted a name, Kate, specifically a Kate Batts, the name of a neighbor who had once been involved in a bitter land dispute with John Bell. There's no evidence that the real Kate Batts had any involvement in the events, and she remained alive throughout the entire period in question. But the voice clung to her name, and from that point forward, people referred to the entity as the Bell Witch. As the months passed, the presence became bolder, and one child in particular became the focus of its attention: Betsy Bell. Still very young, Betsy endured the worst of the physical attacks. She was slapped, pinched, and pulled by invisible hands, sometimes in front of witnesses, leaving visible marks on her skin. The voice whispered threats to her when she was alone, and taunted her openly when others were present. When Betsy became engaged to a local boy named Joshua Gardner, the disturbances intensified dramatically. The voice followed them during their meetings, interrupted them with mocking commentary, and created so much fear and tension that Joshua eventually ended the engagement and left. Whether driven by terror, exhaustion, or social pressure, his departure left Betsy deeply affected and reinforced the belief that the presence was intentionally controlling her life. At the same time, the witch displayed behavior that confused witnesses even further. It sometimes gave the children fruit which would appear without explanation. It debated theology with visiting ministers and often appeared to outmatch them. It seemed capable of being in multiple places at once, speaking simultaneously from different rooms of the house. By this point, the story had spread well beyond the Bell family. Neighbors, skeptics, ministers, and curiosity seekers began visiting the farm, many expecting to expose a hoax or a frightened family. Some left unconvinced, but many others reported hearing the voice themselves, experiencing unexplained disturbances or witnessing objects move without cause. In 1819, one visitor elevated the story from local rumor to national legend. Andrew Jackson, then a celebrated military general and future president, arrived with a group of men, reportedly confident that whatever was happening could be confronted or dismissed. Accounts vary, but the core elements remain consistent. As Jackson's party approached the property, their wagons became immobile on a dry road, despite repeated attempts to move them. At that moment, a voice addressed Jackson directly, telling him he could proceed. The wagons immediately moved freely again. That night, one of Jackson's men, who claimed he could deal with any witch, was allegedly attacked by unseen forces, suffering blows and pins until he begged for mercy. Jackson left the following morning and did not return. Whether he truly said he would rather fight the British again than face the Bell Witch is debated, but the story of his visit spread quickly. Throughout this period, John Bell's health deteriorated in strange ways. He suffered from swelling of the tongue, difficulty speaking, facial twitching, and seizures. Physicians were unable to determine a cause, and the voice mocked him openly, referring to him with contempt and blame. In December of 1820, John Bell fell into a coma. While caring for him, the family discovered a small vial of dark liquid near his bed that no one recognized. When they tested it on a cat, the animal died almost immediately. The voice claimed responsibility, stating that it had given John Bell a dose of the substance. John Bell died the following day. At his funeral, witnesses reported that the voice sang and laughed loudly over the hymns, disrupting the service as the family buried him. After John Bell's death, the disturbances lessened significantly. The witch targeted Betsy less frequently, and the household gradually returned to something resembling normal life. Eventually, the voice announced that it would leave, but promised to return in the future. It did reappear briefly years later, delivering more prophecies before falling silent. Over time, attention shifted to a cave located on the original property, now known as Bell Witch Cave, which became associated with the entity. Visitors have claimed to hear strange sounds and voices, while others experience nothing at all. Step back for a moment. Only after the story is fully told does it make sense to examine why something like this could happen. The Bell Witch events unfolded during a time of isolation, intense religious belief, medical ignorance, and constant physical stress. Frontier families lived with exhaustion, illness, land disputes, and social pressure, often without understanding what was happening to their bodies or their minds. Once a narrative began to form, reinforced by neighbors, ministers, and authority figures, every unexplained event simply fed into it. No deliberate deception is required for this kind of story to grow. Shared belief, fear, expectation, and suggestion can shape our experiences until they feel external and real. What this story shows us about human behavior is not that people were foolish or easily deceived, but that when fear enters a household and refuses to leave, the mind looks for meaning, patterns, and agency. Naming the unknown gives it shape, and once it has shape, it becomes something people can respond to, fear, and remember. The Bell Witch may not have been a witch at all, but the experience was real to the people who lived it. The story has endured for over 200 years, because once a belief takes hold collectively, it doesn't need proof to survive. It only needs to be remembered. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the strange and unexplained. See you next time.